Crushing Iron is back. Where are we?
It's June 29th. Yeah, so where are we again? Back in Overland Park, Kansas. You're back in Wisconsin after some road warriorship from the last week. Again, it's June 29th, 2022. Welcome aboard, everybody. This is the Crushing Iron podcast, and you're about to listen to episode 594. As we inch our way closer to 600. Hope you've had a great week. It's a Wednesday, a little bit late in the week for us, but we are both slowly recovering from another amazing C26 Triathlon camp in Nashville. It was our, I believe, 6th year. I think we keep going back and forth like what year we started, but I'm pretty sure it's our 6th year. It sells out in about a year. It's an amazing weekend, but now that neither one of us live in and around Nashville, we're all out of state. This is for the first time both of us have lived out of state since we put this camp on. So it took a little bit of driving. It took 8 hours and change for me. It took you, a roundabout trip going back to Chat and then back to Wisconsin. So we're a little late. We got stuff to catch up on, and we'll touch on camp as well. But how are you before we do our usual intro? How are you feeling? How are you feeling? Not so much post camp, but how are you feeling post drive?
Post-drive, it's you call me a road warrior, I think. And so after camp, Jason gave me a ride back to Chattanooga, where my car was sitting after it had gotten fixed, and I had to take a U-Haul last time. And then I cleaned out my condo and got up the next day and drove to Nashville. Then I drove all the way here yesterday. And man, it was. And then this morning I went out to the store real quick, and I got to an intersection with a student driver at exactly the same time. And
Ooh,
I thought that was really fun, man. I just, she kind of waved me ahead, and I went, "No, you go." And she goes, "What?"
Oh, dude, you can't do that.
It was outstanding.
Because it's like when you walk through the doorway, right? And you see, sometimes it's two men or man and woman, and you open the door and they're like, "No, you go ahead." And he's like, "No, you go ahead." You're like, "No, you go ahead." Now they're stuck, right? You probably caused her to freeze. You got people piling up behind her. Now she's like, freaking out. You should have just been like, "No, go ahead," and you should have put your hazards on and just. It just really messed.
It was so great though, man.
The flow.
She just we were the only two there too. It was like a weird little. I mean, it wasn't even like a real intersection, and finally I just said, "Nah, you go," and she goes, "All right, and thank you," and waved, and we were waving to each other, and it was great. And then all I could think about was like, after all that driving I've been doing, it's like, you don't even know what you're getting into, man. You just get out of that car now. Use Uber.
She's probably still sweating from that interaction too. It's like, so I remember how totally terrified I used to be to get in front of our driver's teacher was Coach Goff. He was like 77, 78 years old. He had no business being behind the wheel of a car anymore. And he was the one teaching us how to drive. It was a class we could take at school. And as old as he was, he basically only gave one rule. It was like, don't cause wrecks. And when you're on the interstate, go with the flow of traffic. He was like, if they're moving, you move right along with them. If they're going slow, you go. So that was it. But it was incredibly nerve-wracking to do that. But I'm glad you could. She probably went home. She's like, "Mom, Dad, listen, I was at the driver's ed today. Yeah. It came to this exact stop, and there this old guy was across the way. He was doing the wave. I was doing the wave. We both waved at the same time. I didn't know what to do, and I got a B+ today. But here's my license."
No, it's a good story. She turned left in front of me, and I could see she had a Coach Goff next to her, like an older guy, and he was like he was already lecturing her. I was like, oh man. Ooh, that was good.
It's all about the
I'm holding in there, but yeah, it's it hasn't settled, but now I kind of can start to feel settled. Even when I came back a couple weeks ago, I knew we had to do all this shit still. So now it's kind of done, and I can really start unpacking.
Good. Get unpacked, and we'll unpack for you and get this podcast rolling. It's first time tuning in. Welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. Your time is very valuable, so we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do a lot of race recaps and race previews. We'll have on the occasional guest. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life as athletes and coaches ourselves, but also just as human beings on this planet. We also talk a whole lot about what our athletes are going through. We work with a a wide range of athletes from beginner levels, look at athletes trying to do their first sprint or even a 5K, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to Kona, and everyone in between, and from all over. Most in the U.S., but some across the pond, as we always say. And we'll use the feedback we have at them and Training Peaks, text messages, emails, and the like to kind of drive the discussion of the day. We'll also, at least once a month, hop into our closed group, which is on Facebook. You can search Crushing Iron Group, answer one simple question, and be a part of that awesome conversation. A great community, a lot of great people in there. Be a part of it. Ask questions and get some solid answers from a very experienced bunch. We'll do Q&As in there as well. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We definitely don't do ads, and we do have an agenda though, and that's to try and do our best to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
And frankly, that's not an easy task, to stay happy and healthy in this journey. Sometimes
it feels straight impossible these days.
It really does.
To be honest with you, because when you talk about, and I think like happy and healthy are both like intertwined, because I think when most people hear healthy, right, they think physically, and they don't think mentally and emotionally. And and especially as athletes, like when you hear about, oh yeah, I'm getting back, I'm getting healthy again, you immediately think post injury, post surgery, going through physical, whatever it is, rehabbing something. You're like, oh, I hope you get healthy again. What you don't think a lot of is mental and emotional health. Like I'm getting back, trying to be healthy again. People use phrases like, I'm trying to get my mind right, or trying to get back in the game, or whatever it might be. And honestly, like that is, you often find, at least for myself, and I think you're the same, is you find athletes need it's oftentimes a longer journey back from some kind of mental and emotional, you can call it an injury or a traumatic event, or just being in a funk, or stress or obstacles, or bruised ego, or a bad experience. Like those things take time, and we talk about it a lot, and we get emails all the time. You get people who have out of unexplained, really, bad experiences in open water that they've never had before ever in their life. Like had an athlete this last week doing a race and that never had a problem ever, and then got in the water and for some reason had a panic attack. Had to stop at every kayak along the way, unexplainable. And obviously that causes apprehension, anxiety, frustration about how to move forward. You have athletes that have bad bike accidents, and then they're super hesitant about just getting back on the bike, right? And like being outside and doing all these things, and how fast can I go, how hard can I go. Then you have athletes who are coming back from running injuries and things like that, and they're worried to run again and get hurt again. And that's just the physical stuff, right? That plays, that kind of plays into the mindset that we have each day. And that's not even touching on how freaking stressful life can be. And it is right now, I think, for a lot of people, and how that can zap you and really just kind of tie you and hold you down from moving forward. And it can be paralyzing. And I don't use that word lightly, especially in a physical sense, but it can basically set you and concrete you in where you are, afraid to do anything else because you are so mentally and emotionally tied to a negative experience. And those are often the hardest ones to come back from, because there is no end in sight, right? You're not sure, like it's not something tangible like a lot of people's physical injury. Oh, the doctor told me 6 to 8 weeks. Like you don't go in to see a therapist and they're like, hey, I know you're dealing with these issues, 4 to 6 weeks and you'll be good. No one ever says that, right? Because it's a lifelong journey for people. And so I'll be honest, I don't really know how I got here in this part of this conversation, but when we talk about happy and healthy, I do think it's important to really hammer home. And this is something I know that you and I both see eye to eye on and are very passionate about, is health is not just a physical thing. It is honestly a mental and emotional thing first. Because if you had to pick, for me, if you had to pick to be, happy and healthy from a emotional and mental standpoint versus physical, and have that, you got to pick that, because that's what you're always going to be stuck with, is your mind and your heart, and you got to take care of those first.
Yeah, for sure. And what I thought, one of my theories, and I figured it out a long time ago, is like a big part of my happiness seems to be tied to doing things that I'm apprehensive about or afraid of, and to keep kind of going back to the well. And so they're tied together in a lot of ways, and it's not easy. You know what I mean? You can feel like, it's sort of like after we talk about when you finish an Ironman, how everything in your world is perfect at that moment, usually. I mean, you're paying and everything like that, but you're not worried about, paying bills or gas prices or, the market falling or any of that crap. You're just sort of there and you're like, nothing can faze me right now. And, and then maybe like an hour later, you're like, shit, now what? I got to start doing stuff again. So like it never ends, and I think that's the tricky part sometimes is that we have to keep diving back in. And, it's like we go to this camp this weekend and there's a lot of sessions, and you get through with one, you're like relieved. And, I feel really good about it. So, all right, let's get over to the, Percy Warner and run the hills. It's like, and then it's that sort of same cycle repeats. And I think there's something to be said about being able to, we talked about it a few weeks ago, like an attitude adjustment, kind of just crank your mind into a place where it's like, all right, let's just go. And then things are going to be good. But, so it is kind of an ongoing challenge like that. And I agree with you. I think if you can have your head straight, then everything else obviously seems a little easier. And, but, it's, there's like no magic formula, I feel like. And that's sort of the tricky part, it's like people in triathlon are looking for different solutions and, do I train to go long or do I like the shorter, harder stuff and then how can I fit this into my schedule and when do I get rest and all these kind of things come into play. And it's a puzzle, man.
Yeah, and it's so funny you mentioned that and we'll talk about camp here in a little bit, but and I guess it kind of goes in the same bucket in terms of observations from camp, and we have this for every camp. Is how much people enjoy being around other people, and one of the hardest things I think about the last 2 to 3 years is, listen, there's tons. There's tons of benefits, obviously, to working remotely. People love it. It's flexibility. You can work from home, but it seems like every new thing that's happening in the last few years has been about basically isolating ourselves from people. Mm-hmm. Right? We can work remotely. We can work out in our basement. We can work on our treadmill. We can swim alone. Like everything we do can be done alone. You don't have to go to the grocery store anymore. You don't have to go shopping. You can live inside your house and never leave. Work out, work, have the store drop off and your goods, and that's it. And I think we miss, as hard as human interaction can be, I think we lose touch and lose sight of how beneficial, right, it can be, and talk about in the positive impacts, right? Because what happens is when you isolate yourself at home, and you don't isolate yourself, you isolate yourself physically, mm-hmm. right? Because you're still allowing the world to impact you, because everything can be everything is accessible, right? The news, right? Social media, all these things that can be so incredibly negative, right? And especially when there's so much, in my opinion, just really shitty and negative news coming out, especially in the last week, that it's not like you can't isolate, right? You're isolating again physically from other people, but you're still absorbing it, right? And you don't have people around you to bounce things off and bounce good energy off of. You're stuck with your own energy. And when you read so many things in the news and you see so many things in politics and you see so many things being decided and you read things that worry you and like you absorb those, right? And now you're leaving yourself responsible for dealing with those, right? You can deal with them physically, you can work out, you can train, you can do whatever. But it's not like a lot of people are going out and connecting with people, and getting that energy and that feedback back. That's why, like, when you read all these hacks and stuff, it's always about like, something that's physically tangible, losing weight, your skin clearing up, or, being faster in 6 weeks. None of it is mental and emotional. It's not like, hey, these are, here's the 8-minute workout a day to get rid of your anxiety. Here's the 12 steps that can take 2 weeks to get rid of isolation, or here's the quick fix and the 4-minute meditation to rid yourself of depression. You don't see any of that, because those things are they're not just things that have an undetermined end. They're usually a lifelong journey, right? That you have to consistently be successful at. Like there will never be an end to being a recovering alcoholic. It will never be finished. It is something you just have to be you have to be diligent with every day of your life forever. And that is just something that you don't have it in for. There's no like magic pill. There'd be great if there was, right? Because I think it would help a whole lot of people out, but there's not. And that's why people gravitate so much towards these quick fixes or these things that, you know, we feel like we can have some kind of control over, that we can see an end date, which is, again, like you talked about a few minutes ago, why you feel so much of a high, right, when an Ironman race is over. You know, because the buildup is also this thing. Like, you know what date it's going to be on, you know, for the most part, even, and that's why we also mentioned, I think, and you brought this up a few podcasts ago, is like why some people are kind of still, you know, a little gun shy, you know, about signing up for races and like kind of getting emotionally and mentally attached because you had them yanked away for 2 years, you know? And so now that those are coming back, you're like, I got something to attach myself to. I got an exact date this is going to happen. There's so much unpredictability in the world. This is predictable. I can control it. And then it happens and you're so, you know, you're infused with all this enjoyment and love and excitement and you're thrilled and you're happy, and then it's gone. Right, and then it's over with, and then that's like register button. You know, it's like you're getting it's like you're pumping your veins full of adrenaline that you're going to last you the rest of the year. And every pump of adrenaline costs you $800 to Ironman.com on whatever race you're going to get. You know, and it's just it's really hard.
Crypto,
and that's one of those things. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's how I feel buying crypto sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. That's one of my favorite commercials. They're like the TurboTax commercial when they talk about doing your TurboTaxes for crypto, and they show the guy like 1 minute. He's like, oh, I'll be partying like a millionaire, and like the split second later,
exactly.
he's like, he's got his head down on his desk. He's like, no, I'm broke.
Yeah.
But that's to me, you know, we'll go that way. Is like we're gonna start asking ourselves some questions about camp and in our biggest observations, but. Which for you, you know, and I know we both see camp a lot of the same ways, but, you know, have a lot of, you know, different views because we get, you know, interact with different people in different ways at different times. From a mental and emotional aspect, what do you feel? What did you notice the most at camp with either the group of the athletes that we had or a singular athlete?
I always notice like when, you know, maybe somebody's new to camp and how they kind of like tread lightly and kind of come in and then slowly emerge into, like, you know, as the, you know, we put the camp on, so we're always kind of like, I don't want to say nervous, but we always want to make sure people get along and have a good time and you know, get something good stuff out of it. And then you see some people and they're like, you can kind of tell they're maybe hedging a little bit and not sure what's going on, but then to watch slowly how they kind of immerse themselves in the group. And then by the end, they're kind of like the happiest, or, you know, like almost I don't want to say leader necessarily, but they're kind of like really leading a charge sort of like, let's get it going. And, you know, it's sort of like the stress washes off of them throughout camp. And then they become, you know, it's sort of like they emerge into the group and then they're just like everybody else, you know? And I think that's when I was saying I always try to do tough things or things that scare me, and it was sort of like, you know, for me, you know, starting to play drums was that, you know, I was going totally out of my element. You know, I really wanted to do it, but it scared the crap out of me. And then suddenly I was put on stage one time, and I mean, it was the worst day of my life, really, but it felt awful. But when I got done, it was sort of like, you know, people don't judge you. You know what I mean? I think we all have a tendency to think that there's going to be, you know, some kind of bad judgment, or like we have these things from our childhood, or, you know, like kids picking on you or something like that. But I feel like, you know, most people are generally good. And if you just kind of show up and give your effort and show passion for something, you know, that all works out. So I think that there's something to be said for, I think that happens to triathletes all the time, you know, whether it's they're going from training by themselves into a group or a new group or with a bunch of friends and stuff. There's always a little bit of anxiety, right? Because, you know, I don't know if I can keep up or if this is going to be this or whatever. But I love to see how people sort of get through that process. It's 4 days, and and for me, I can genuinely see it. Like each day, getting more comfortable and confident, and just feeling better around strangers, really. What about you?
Yeah, the amount of courage that you see these athletes, because I mean, listen, like, you know, when people see, like, you know, C26 Triathlon Camp, they think it's like athletes only, but it's not. I mean, and we always have, I don't know, 5 or 6 people who aren't athletes that we work with, personally as coaches, come to camp, and they always kind of say like, the same thing. Hey, I was super nervous about coming the whole ride up here, trying to convince myself not to come, and then within 30 minutes, I felt like I was at home, like I was surrounded by family and friends. Everyone's so welcoming and encouraging. And you can't help but think like, takes a whole lot of courage, right? Like, and risk, right? Like, I think that's something that we've become so adverse to, because we feel like, I think, life throws enough risk at us already, and obstacles and stress. Like, why would we add extra risk, right, onto the life right now, the life we're living right now, and the things that are going on in the world are not going on, and you're like, risk isn't for me. No thanks. Like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna take all my money. I'm gonna set it aside. I'm gonna put it underneath my mattress, and 2 years from now, I'll probably put it back in the market and see what happens. Like, I'm just gonna play it safe. I'm not risking things right now. And there was this quote I heard from this podcast I was listening to the way down here that kind of is very similar to that. That's from Warren Buffett. And he said, when people are greedy, he said, be fearful when everyone's greedy, and be greedy when everyone's fearful. Yeah. And what he's saying is you have to go kind of against the grain. And that's what, when you take risk, right, and putting yourself, because it's not a risk physically to come to camp. It's a risk, though, to come mentally and emotionally. What if, I feel like an outcast? What if I'm an outsider? What if I don't fit in? Think of all the things that we do, myself included, that we don't do in the name of keeping ourselves safe, right? And it's not really safe that we're, keeping ourselves safe. It's what do we not do in the spirit of, or in the name of, protecting our ego, or, mitigating the risk of our feelings getting hurt, or something not going the way that we thought it would be? Is it skipping races, right? Is it not doing a workout because you might have been able to do it? Is it not going to a group workout? Is it not signing up for a camp? What are we so afraid of, right? And because the biggest things, like you said a few minutes ago, is, you get a lot of fulfillment out of doing things that absolutely terrify you, right? It's not like the normal things like walking to your mailbox today and, doing this and, and walking back and saying, oh, that was man, the adrenaline from that thing, off the charts. I got 3 things in the middle of the day, 2 junks, 1 pill. It was outside. It was insane. No, you don't get anything from that. Like, that's like watching Hayden ride his bike. He starts to, like, riding down the street now is no big deal. He's just kind of like doing his own thing. But when he starts to do like he'll take his hands off, one of his hands off, and he does does a few things that I know scare him a little bit. But when he does it, he's like, see, I did that. He feels very, energized and happy to do it. And I think as adults, we get so we kind of shrink back into this mode of protection. And believe me, I get it. Like, there's a lot out there that is to be, worried about. And I'll share a little bit of a text back and forth that I have an athlete today, and you'll get a kick out of this too, is he texted me at 7:15 and said, hey, you want to do 70.3 Puerto Rico with me in 2023? And I said, why? I said, that feels like a trick question. He said, because Puerto Rico is paradise. You could surely figure out how to write that trip off. But most importantly, one day we're going to wake up and we're going to die.
Oh, he hit you hard.
Man, you are bringing it hot on a Wednesday morning. Yeah. I wasn't prepared for that, and I didn't have a rebuttal.
Yeah, you can't come back.
My only rebuttal was
I'll see you there.
Yeah, I mean, my rebuttal was, dude, I just looked up flights on the internet, and it says Kansas to Puerto Rico 6 hours, and I almost had a panic attack. It doesn't really feel like living. But it's true, right? It's so incredibly true that the most beneficial and fulfilling things we do in life originally scare us. When you sign up for a race, you have this healthy level of fear, right? And the more we do them, a lot of times that fear kind of goes away, but it also kind of brings, about like, the sophomore slump, like we've had a podcast, I think, called the Sophomore Slump of Ironman, where your first one is so kind of scary and terrifying. You work so hard, you're so diligent, you cross all your T's, you dot all your I's, you do all these things. And you do it once, you're like, it don't scare me anymore. And then the next year what you do, you kind of go about it lazy. I got this. I can do the distance. And then what happens? You're just slower at the exact same time. You're like, man, what? I can't believe I didn't get faster, because you got to have that healthy fear, right? To push yourself. And it is. And like in camp, when you see people come in and they are energized by other people, it's the cumulative effect of of positive energy and good people. And right now, it seems like all we're doing is going the opposite. How far away can I get from people in general, right? Are there any races that have a cap of 1 where I can go out and do 1, and be the only person there because everything else is terrifying? It's great to push yourself mentally and emotion because that's how you have breakthroughs also physically. But I think it's a period in time where challenging yourself or finding ways and being proactive and trying to find ways to challenge yourself mentally and emotionally, and not and for everything you do, not to the first thing to be, all right, how safe can I be today? How many risks can I not take today? I want to keep things as safe and as controlled as possible. Then when you step out in the real world, that's not really how it works, right? Kind of going back to your intersection with the girl doing the driver's ed. You were cool, calm, and collected, right? Because you've been driving for forever. She was terrified, right?
Yeah.
Of a simple 4-way stop, right? And you were motioning her to come on. Another person would have been phased, right? But it's about doing things for a long period of time. It's just, it is a, when you talk about happy and healthy, the health of the mind and the health of the soul leads us. It just does. But it can also paralyze us with fear and create a pattern of non-action, right? In terms of we worry so much about, there's a same podcast I was listening to last week. I had this really great quote, and I was like, man, that's so true in terms of training. And this guy said, focus on building the ark, not waiting for the rain. And obviously he's talking about, back in the biblical days when Noah's building his ark and preparing for the whole world to basically be flooded, and how so many of us basically live our life waiting for it to rain, right? And just sit there paralyzed of the terrible day that's going to come, and when is it going to come? Because guess what? We don't have any idea, right? We don't have any idea when our best race is going to come, or our best session is going to come, or whatever it is. We have no idea. We like to predict it, but that's all we do. We spend so much of our time worrying about the what, the when, the why, and the how. And we have zero answer and zero control. But what we can and do have control over is what we do daily, right? To commit ourselves to a process, to get up, make a decision to run, make a decision to swim, make a decision to ride, make a decision to take care of our body, to be healthy, to do things that bring us joy, or to work out in a manner that brings us energy, that doesn't beat us down, right? This is another huge thing where, athletes is like, it's like a badge of honor to make yourself throw up after a workout, or you're shelled laying on the ground. I'm like, you did it wrong. It's like, that's not really how it works. But to treat yourself like that and to be positive, like we have those decisions we can make daily, but so many people have gotten caught up in looking down the road and trying to predict failures, misery, injury, poor performance, and your mind takes you where you end up living. And it's become a symptom of society in that we think our ways into a life that we don't love and that we don't like. And then we end up blaming the world and the universe for where we got, when we led ourselves there by our attitude, our mentality, and our inability to take charge of our own path and make choices for ourselves. And I think that's just you see it all the time, especially with athletes, because we are type A, right? We like to be in total control. We like to have things done exactly how they should be done all the time. And we worry about everything in the future, and we spend very little time focusing on the success of the present.
Yeah. I like what you said, day to day, do what you do day to day. Because I had another analogy sort of in mind when I like to think, because it's like sort of going down, or it's like mountain biking, or if you're in a river and you're floating down a river and it's just kind of chaotic and everything, instead of like fighting it, you got to kind of just roll with it and do what's in front of you. And because you just can't over muscle life, and then we get all these things that pop into our daily life. And I've talked about this before with the concept of premature optimization, where we want to plan out, the race 6 months from now. And then we look at our calendar and go, okay, this build, this is going to be perfect. Okay. Then all right, I'm going to be perfect there. And then today you don't feel like working out, or like, something comes up, and then everything's like, oh, there goes, that screws up the whole, flow of everything. And it's just like, I really think with triathletes, if you're not a pro and you're not, if you have nothing else going on, if you're working, you have a life and kids and families and all that stuff, and you just have to be able to adapt and adjust and take what's given to you that day, and you talked about this control, type A control. I don't consider myself necessarily type A, but I certainly have a control issue thing. Cause I don't like, I wake up and I have a little plan for the day, and then, I get a text and it just throws everything, crazy. And that pisses me off, like most people probably, but it's like, you have to flow with it. And, there's this go with the flow. It's such a powerful concept, and I think it's so difficult, it's like, I have a problem with it, like if something changes, even at camp or something, if like a plan changes, and I'm sure most people are, oh, I had this plan, I had all my nutrition ready for this. And it's like, you got to adjust, man, just roll with it. And it's really not that big a deal either. We get so, I think, trapped in this wanting to have everything perfect. It's sort of a perfectionism thing too. And I just feel like when everything is not like the farthest from perfect that it actually is perfect, that's kind of how life is, and when I'm thinking and my brain is in the right place, I can view it like that. It's like, okay, well, this didn't work out right, but that's the way it was supposed to work out, even though you didn't want it to plan it that way. But yeah, I just think it's dangerous getting with our business even, I think that we've always been kind of pretty good at just adjusting, we have sort of loose plans that we're, and guideposts that we sort of look at, but, sometimes, our ideas aren't the greatest, and we have to kind of readjust, and we do that pretty well, I think. So, I think that really does apply to training and just the way to think about being a triathlete.
Perfection can lead to feeling paralyzed. It always has, and it always will, because what it does is it kind of puts you in a place of resistance, because why do it if I can't do it perfectly, right? Why do it or attempt it if I can't PR? Why do it or attempt it if I can't do it really well? Why do it, or even attempt it if I can't beat my last time? Why start on Wednesday because I've already missed Monday and Tuesday? I'll just start till next week. Like we're obsessed with this illusion of perfection when no one has ever had the perfect day, right? No such thing as perfection. No such thing as a perfect day. You have days where things probably felt right. It probably felt like super easy. Yeah, but there's probably something that didn't go right, right? And so the illusion in the illusion of perfection and the pursuit of it prevents so many people from being successful, and not just from being successful, but also from doing things, right? And trying things and learning new things about themselves, pushing themselves harder, whether that's, you're afraid to do a course with hills and it's you only choose flat courses, or you're afraid of what might happen in the swim, so you always choose downstream swims. Well, you're still getting in the water, right? Still getting on the road, still, putting in your running shoes. We try to control so much, and most of the best and greatest learning experiences everyone has comes from surprises, right? Things you didn't expect. Something popped up and you adjusted, right? Or something presented itself that you weren't prepared for and you didn't like it, but you found a way to overcome it, and then here you are, right? Like we learn and we grow and we create confidence from challenging ourselves, like by doing things that we're not good at. But that's the thing, is like we don't normally, like, people are very resistant that I'm not very good at it, I don't want to do it. If you really want to, learn and enjoy things, you have to just kind of have this insatiable appetite for just growth and pushing yourself and challenging yourself, because that's also how you feel the most rewarded, right? Like, we're at camp and you see open water swim, or you see the trace, or we're out running. You rarely ever see people come back with a huge smile on their face or a huge grin that's like, they're just exuding, the feeling so proud of themselves when they've done the exact same thing that they've done before. No, it's about when they do something new. They're like, I didn't think I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see it in their eyes that they get built up with this new level of confidence and that they normally wouldn't have done, right? Because we work it in our safe space, right? Because we want to have control. We want everything to be perfect, conditions to be this. And then they go do something where they don't think about it and they're like, oh, I can do this, right? And this just, it's like a whole new world open up to be successful and to push yourself and to grow. And that is what it's all about, right? It is to put yourself in those situations, to challenge yourself, right? And to, because you never know what's going to happen until you do it. And even if it doesn't go perfectly, you can still learn something from it, right? There's still something to be said for attempt and failure, right? And because as long as it's a lesson that you learn, right? And you can't learn a lesson as soon as it happens. You know, I had somebody at camp saying, yeah, well, lesson learned. I was like, that's not true because you just did it. You haven't learned a lesson yet. You know, learning a lesson means you don't do it again, you know, or you like, we don't know that yet. That's yet to be seen. It's, you learn it, you make a mistake, you have a failure and you're like, all right, how can I not do this the next time? Or, you know, how can I do it better? And you do that by taking risks and challenging yourself. And it's not supposed to be perfect, right? And you and I have both kind of gone back and forth this for the years. Like, you know, you've always found that cycling is the one that you're like, yeah, I don't really need to work on it because I'm kind of natural at it. So you don't spend as much time on it, right? As you do the run and the swim. Mm-hmm. But I also think I did the same thing with the swim, right? I don't put as much time and work in it sometimes as I should have because I don't see this huge benefit in it. But I also love the feeling that I get when I run and I ride because I feel like those are my weakest because I'm not the best at it, right? And you see some athletes the opposite. They only want to do what they're good at, right? Mm-hmm. They only want to do the ones that they feel really, really good. I don't want to, this got hills. I think I'm good. I'm better at flats. Well, you're better at flats because you've always been so terrified of hills. Yeah. And that's just a fact. Like you never know until you go all in, not just dabble in it. Right? You hear people say this all the time about short course versus long. I'm just a long course guy. That's it. I'm a long course. Are you? Have you never put in the time and the work to figure out if you're better at short course? Same goes for a short course. I can't do long course. Have you ever? No. Well, that's why, because you chose not to. Of course, you can't do anything if you choose not to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's just, and it comes down to those small choices we make every day and every session for every race are those choices. And the answer should be, you know, yes, I'm going to give it a whirl. Not, no, I think I'll just, you know, take the safe way out.
Mm-hmm. But because it's weird because honestly, cycling, like I do feel like that is my strength, but we've gone through that before, but mm-hmm. But like it's my least favorite too. So, and you know, this is something I discovered out there because I hadn't really ridden a lot ever since I had planned on doing Chat 70.3, especially on my tri bike. I've done some mountain bike stuff, but I got my tri bike, and this is a lesson I learned. Maybe I didn't learn it yet because, like you said, I haven't, you know, not done it again. But what's interesting to me about cycling, and I can say this almost 100% for most of my races, it's usually not my legs. It's always my upper body, and I think that I just wanted to bring that up before I forgot about it because I honestly wonder sometimes if that isn't the most overlooked thing with most triathletes is their upper body. Because, you know, you talk about swimming and then you talk about aero and the position and the bike, you know, it's like it takes a lot out of my upper body. I mean, I don't know if it's just more flexibility or core strength or what the heck it is, but that to me, you know, the saddle pains and all that kind of stuff, but it's like my legs usually feel pretty solid most of the time. And it comes down to how hard cycling can be on your upper body. Because I don't know, man, I just wonder if like sometimes we neglect that kind of thing. And we talk about, you know, being strong and sort of strength training and things like that. And I think we always focus on our legs, and our legs are kind of always engaged because we're always walking around and standing usually or whatever. But anyway, I just want to throw that in there as something I was thinking about. But it's like, is swimming your favorite? Can't be.
No.
Can't be.
It's not. No, you know, it honestly really is.
So how do you get this sport is really challenging in that regard too, is like really liking everything, you know, to the point where you can want to do it.
No one ever likes everything all at one time. Right. At least not in my experience. I mean, I'm sure there's some people do, but not really. Most people don't. Like they have one thing that they love, one thing that they're okay with, and one thing they currently hate. That's kind of how it
I
works.
know.
But that's also the greatness of having three, right? Of three sports, right? Of three sports that, one's always going to be your favorite. Sometimes my favorite's running. Sometimes my favorite's riding. And then very few times my favorite is swimming, but sometimes it is. What I have found in my experience of training and racing for like almost 20 years now is when the discipline that is more oftentimes than not my least favorite, which is swimming. The period of time when I've been in the best shape and the best groove has been when my love or passion or focus for swimming has been more in line with the other two.
I like that.
And things become have been more well-rounded, right? It's not just swimming and riding and then swimming. It's all three together. It's how are these, each fitting in a piece to the puzzle that is me becoming, a faster triathlete or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's without question. Every single time I look back, the period of times where I've been the most focused on training, had the most fun, it's been the most simplistic in the form that I just wake up, I do it, I wake up, I do the next one, go to bed, rinse and repeat every single time. I'm ingrained and focused on the process and checking the boxes. Not, I really don't want to go because I really hate swimming today, because it's a piece of the puzzle, right? And triathlon is already a very difficult, puzzle, or to crack, if you will, and to put all together because there's so many moving parts, right? And so many pieces to remove into place and what's more important and what's least important. And so when I'm in the zone, when I'm in the zone with swimming, I'm in the zone with all of them, because if I can put the most focus into the one that I feel like I get the least out of, then I know that I'm doing everything else right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And and I think most people probably like if you're listening to this, you're like, yeah, if you hate running, but you're still doing it, right? And like, yeah, well, if I'm putting that much focus into the one that usually keeps me from doing it, then I know the other ones are getting done. So if I'm not missing swims, I know I'm not missing, rides and runs, period. But there are plenty of times where I'm not missing rides and runs, but I'm missing swims, and so I think it's all connected. But going back to what you said about, upper body fatigue and strength and cycling, it's 100% fact, 100% fact. And one of the first, I think 50 podcasts we ever did, I referenced a paper. I can't remember who was written because that was 4 years ago, that talked about the correlation in arm fatigue and leg RPE, so perceived level exertion.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a paper that was basically was talked about that in cyclists, if their arms were really, really fatigued, their RPE was higher from the power output they were putting, meaning the more tired your arms are, the more effort you feel like you have to put in to maintain the same level of power with your legs. There's a direct correlation to that. And so if you think about it, right, and you go back, and this is something that we work on with our athletes so much, is upper body, because what happens is this, triathlete Tim barely swims, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't really matter. It's not that big of a deal. It's only 1.2 or 2.4. I'm not going to get any faster. I got to wear a wetsuit. It's a downstream swim. Swim. It takes the most time. I'm just going to swim once or twice a week, maybe. And I'll just put my pool buoy on and my jammers and my paddles and my snorkel and my fins, and I'll just cruise straight through for 3,000 meters twice a week. Check. Then you go ride your bike inside. Sometimes you're sitting straight up, texting on your phone, hopping on, Snapchat, TikTok, and, hitting up your group text and your messages, and you're not gripping your bike. You're not handling your bike. A lot of times you're not even shifting your bike. You're not keeping yourself upright. You're not engaging your core. You're not staying in a good position, right? And you train like that 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Then race day happens. Oh, shit. I got to swim 4,400 yards a day, or 2,400.
Mm-hmm.
I got to really work hard. My arms are going to be fatigued. right? Because I didn't do enough strength work. I didn't do enough pull work. I didn't use paddles. I didn't get really, really fit up in the arm. The upper body feels weak. Then I'm going to hop on the bike and, oh my God, I've got to steer, right? And I've got to control my bike with my arms and my core. And I do it for how long? Oh my God, 7 hours? And you wonder why, one, people can't hold position, right? An air position on their bike. And two, why you see people after 10 minutes shaking their arms out. Like, you're in trouble. You're in trouble because because listen, just like we talk about from the moment you step in the water or from the time you cross the finish line, it's about energy expenditure. You're already expending energy. That was a good one. You're already using energy for your upper body, whose job should be pretty much done right after the swim. You're so fatigued now because you're not in shape to, again, just handling your bike. And those are two things that I think, as much as we can say them till we're blue in the face, as many times as you and I have both mentioned it over almost 600 podcasts, it'll still go in one ear and right out the other, because there is no Strava segment for strength in your arms, right? There is for swimming, right? You're going to see some swim improvement, but in terms of the low level kind of hanging fruit that isn't directly identified in a peak performance, those are the things that people just kind of like, I don't want to worry about that because I can't see it today. But it shows up on race day. And for most people, when it does show up, it shows up in a negative way because you haven't prepared for it.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't even think about the upper body and the running, either. And what you said something about the swim is like when your swim is coming together and you're working hard at it, everything comes together. And that makes so much sense to me. And I wonder if, why sometimes you don't like swimming is because what kind of swimmer you can be and are in top form. And when you go and you're not in top form, you kind of start hating it worse because you're like, this is ridiculous. I know I can get it, but I just don't feel like going through the process. And that's how I feel on the bike, I think. And there's certainly, it certainly makes sense that once I get my bike going, and I've noticed this on the trainer, because like I've fallen in love with the trainer before after like a month, though. It takes a while to kind of get into that cycle of being like, I can't wait to get on there because it's really, you're kind of getting your fitness back, and then it becomes more fun, right? And if you're a good swimmer and you kind of get in the water, you're like, shit, I will just do that tomorrow or whatever. You kind of start kicking the can a little bit because you can get it back. But it makes sense that if you're on top of that game, that everything else will sort of start falling into place once you can get, whatever event listeners don't like the most, if you can get that one up to where you want to get it, that makes sense that the other ones will seem easier and all start falling together.
I frequently, and this might sound like a really strong word, when I get back in the pool and I start swimming again after the first session, I will resent the fact that I didn't swim more.
Yeah.
And almost feel bad, right? And that's a strong word, and it might not make sense to you, but and honestly, it's also a level of guilt sometimes that, listen, as a triathlete, I'm super fortunate, very, 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 very fortunate to have swam year-round growing up, to have extensive open water experience, and that was my job for an entire year. That I could, take 6 months off of swimming, go hop in the pool, and average somewhere in the 120s. And as a coach, you work with people who put in so much time and effort, and they're trying to work their way down from 230s down to 215s to 2 minutes to 50s. I'll be totally honest. I sometimes get out and I'm like, God, you're such a piece of shit. Like honestly, it's like, not in like, a really negative self-talk way, but like, man, like, when are you going to stop? This is real talk. When are you going to stop wasting your ability just because you have it? And I think that is something that a lot of people struggle with in a lot of areas in life is why are you wasting the ability that you have, right? Because it still takes work, right? Do I think if I put in 6 months of really, really, really hard swim training, could I do a sub 1 minute off the wall in the 50 in the 100 free? For sure. Right? Have I ever done that? No. I've gotten close. I've done like a 102 or a 103. This was like 2 years ago. But I haven't. And honestly, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's well, that's not true. I kind of know what it is because I've always been that guy that's been. I get so close to seeing things through when it comes to things athletically, that I'm almost afraid to see what might peak on the other side. Right? It's kind of like I like to put myself in that category of like, as my mom is always kind of chagrined, like a very consistent underachiever when it comes to like academics and athletics. Like, could do really well if I really, really apply, quote unquote, applied myself as a mom's favorite, like my teacher saying, Robbie is really smart and he would make better grades if he only applied himself. And my mom, give me that look like, hey, I'm the principal here. When are you going to get your act together? And so, but I had that, I think, with swimming specifically. And I think there's also a lot wrapped up in that for me personally from swimming year round for so long and having like a hate relationship, because that's what took me out of it. Right. I walked out of that. I shared this thing on a podcast. I quit swimming in the middle of a practice. I got out. I was crying, just bawling while I was doing a kick set, and walked off the deck and went over to my coach, Lisa Richards. Remember, it was like yesterday, Carver Road YMCA inside the bubble in February. And I just looked over at her and said, I quit. I said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. And then went home and had this, huge long discussion with my parents, who were like, wait a minute, I can't wrap my brain around this. Like, you've been devoting your life to swimming since you were, 3 or 4, and all of a sudden overnight you're done. But it wasn't overnight, right? It builds up over time. Like, nothing, just like success isn't, there's no such thing as overnight success. There's kind of always like it happening, in the darkness of time where people don't see you, and then overnight it kind of breaks through. Same thing goes for the hard things in life. When you quit something, it didn't happen overnight, right? When people get burnt out with triathlon or burnt out with training, it didn't happen today. No. Right? It happened over time, and that's what happened for me. So I do think there's a piece of me that honestly still struggles with that piece of swimming and the love-hate relationship that I had back then that was so much promise athletically and from an accomplishment standpoint, to just walking away. And it's the first one of the 3 sports that I do that I walk away from every single time when I'm training. If I give it up, it's a swim. And so, yeah, I think there's probably a lot, wound up in that. And I'll Venmo you my $15 copay.
Dude, I think that's very common, though. I mean, I hear that about swimming a lot, and I think it probably happens in running a lot. Youth runners or youth swimmers, they probably, because once you hit that, if you're trying to shoot for that sub 1 minute 100, then it's kind of like, well, I got nothing else to shoot for. Then it's kind of, I always subconsciously think about stuff like that once you hit the pinnacle, and sometimes I wonder if I don't self-sabotage the bike a little bit on the same regard, because it's like, man, it's so hard to get there. And then I've even mentioned it before, like my goal back in the day was like, I really was like obsessed with getting to Kona. And then a few years ago I said, well, I think I still want to do that, but if I qualify, I don't think I'm going to go, because then I got to work even harder, the next year. And it's like, shit, right. This is, it sort of seems like it never ends sometimes. And I think sometimes we do want to just sit back and smell the flowers a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just like, in triathlon, you got 3 sports. In order to get to that podium or that Kona qualifier, you got to kind of nail them all, and that's a lot of work. And then what? I think that's a fear, really. It's sort of like when I was younger, I was always this guy that wanted to move, right? I wasn't happy where I was. I was living in Rockford at the time, which is easy to do, not be happy there. But I kind of liked it in a weird way. But I would always be like, well, if I can always move if I want to. But I was always afraid to move, because if I went there and then there was the same problem, I'd be like, uh-oh, this is me now.
Me. Oh, yeah. I'm not in.
Yeah. So, but it was kind of always nice having that, well, I can always move, like you have the option. I can always go get that sub 1 minute if I want. But, then you get there and then you're kind of bummed if, like if it doesn't really like make you feel like you think you're going to feel. I don't know, There's probably something to do with Ironman there too. I'm going to go do an Ironman. And then once you do it, then you get done a month later, you're like, okay, now how am I going to be happy?
Yeah, no, listen, and I think a lot of it too is, and I think you're probably there with me too in some ways, as far as the sport in general, is that, I also know with swimming, the closer I get to these times, I kind of go back in time, right? I'm kind of like, man, like, look what you gave up, right? Look what you had, then you lost, right? It's like it's like, man, I was, it could have definitely swam in college and definitely have it kept on the same trajectory. It's like, man, like what, man? And now now you're just getting back in the pool and doing this. And it's like, it's like you're mad at yourself for not sticking with it. You're not, keeping on or not being consistent with it. And that keeps you being inconsistent with it. Right. So it's a really weird kind of, delicate. Like and I think and people have this with running too. Like, and they have bad experiences with sports that keep them out of it for a lifetime, right? And keep them away from the sport. They had a bad coach. Like, I really don't want to run anymore because I had a bad experience. Like, there's a lot of things wrapped up in a lot of things. And I think that, obviously, talking through them is healthy and good. But also trying to figure out a positive way to move past it, right? And see the good and the way to, do things and I have this, kind of hits me in the gut every time I talk to Hayden about it. Not just swimming, but training. He's like, when, like, he was this camp, for example, we had camp this last week, and he was like, so what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to coach, and, I'll swim some and bike some. He goes, no, you don't do that anymore. He said, you just coach. You don't do that. You don't swim, bike, run anymore. I was like, dude, I'm telling you, dude, he's brutal. He's ruthless. I'm like, what do you mean I don't do? He's like, he said, you are a coach. You are not. I'm looking at him like, dude, I'm about to like take your knees out. I'm like, what do you mean I'm just a coach? He's like, you don't swim, bike, run. He's like, your athletes swim, bike, run. You just tell them how to swim, bike, run and when to swim, bike, run. I was like, oh my God. I was like, dude, I was like, I'm done. I got to get my shit together. Like, I gotta get back out there, or he's gonna think I'm some, like, retired, washed up, George Steinbrenner. It's like, what have I done with my life? But it's like, then you kind of think like, oh, I gotta get back on, the horse here. But it's like I think we always kind of have that with life, and we think about what we haven't done versus what we can do and what we are able to do. And I think that, is an important aspect of keeping training healthy, and happy, from not just, a physical point of view, but, a positive, healthy point of view that allows you to keep coming back and to do things that are, beneficial and not get tied up so much in what you haven't done or what you did do, right? Positive, in a good or the bad, but what you can do next. And I guess that's the point of it, where we can wrap it up, is, what you've done in the past is honestly, it's irrelevant, right? We're all prisoners of the moment in the worst ways, but never in the best ways. And, if you want to do something different in the future, then you got to change what you're doing today, and that's just a fact, right? And if you want to do something better than you did in the past, you got to change things up. If you want to, right some wrongs, and you got to start today, and it's a day-to-day thing that we have to make a choice to do it better. And, whether it's you've been, not training the way you want to do, and your kid looks at you and says you're retired, nothing, then maybe it's time to get back on the horse and prove them wrong. But it's the wonderful world of endurance sports, where we are constantly trying to get better while at the same time, trying to figure out why we haven't gotten there already. And that's the physical, mental, emotional piece that keeps us coming back.
Yeah. And quickly, I'm a big fan of sort of micro goal, and you said day to day before, and I think that's a really great way to look at things. Is, you can have a sort of a general target out there always. I think it's good to have like things that you want to do, but like once you get real specific with it, and I know that a lot of people say you got to ingrain it in your mind, have pictures of exactly what you want and all that sort of stuff. But then, with life and what really happens on a daily basis with everything we got to go through, and then trying to be a triathlete that wants to go sub 10-hour Ironman or whatever. And if you don't do it, then it becomes like, shit, man, why should that bum you out? I think that in a way, I'm more interested in training and just training well and feeling good and feeling healthy. And then just sort of almost being more surprised by a good day or something like that, just because you feel good along the way. But that's hard to do.
It's very hard to do.
Thank you for listening.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. I've appreciated this therapy session. We both needed it. As always, we appreciate you guys. We do. We love you. We appreciate you listening to our podcast and giving your feedback. And if you have a minute, go to iTunes, give us a review, and let us know what you think. It's a great way to grow our community and support us. If you need anything, you can go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's the one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. We have our camp already live for our current athletes, and it's already halfway full. We'll open that up to the general public next Monday or next Tuesday. And I think Monday's July 4th, so probably Tuesday. And we'd love to see you. We love having people come in, especially if you're a listener or just, Joe Blow from the internet who searches Triathlon Camp and picks us. It's a great time. It's a great experience. Come for the coaching and gain a whole community is what most of our athletes like to say. So you can go on there. If you're struggling or need of guidance and of a coach for the rest of the year, you can also click on the coaching tab and peruse the roster of coaches we have and see which one fits you best. And that's it. If you got any questions or anything from Mike specifically, he is available, CrushingIron@gmail.com. And if you need anything from me specifically, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man. I guess that's it for today.
That's it. Check you later.
Nice talking to you on a Wednesday.
You too, buddy.
See you, man.